We all know that Vegas-based trivia, but by the end of this video, I guarantee you that you'll have been at some point shocked at some of the strange things that have actually happened either in Vegas or have a direct connection with the city that we know and love. Oh, and by the way, because somebody in the comments will inevitably accuse me of making some of these over-the-top things up, citations will be in the show more box of this video for you to go check it out yourself. So you ready? Here we go. Number 1, water usage. Now, you know that water is precious in the desert, but most people don't know or simply can't understand how Vegas managed to grow by nearly 1 million people in 19 years, but somehow managed to reduce its water use by a staggering 26 billion gallons. Right, so between 2002 and 2021, Vegas grew by 750,000 people, but if you compare the water used in Vegas for the 2 years, Vegas used 26 billion gallons less in 2021 than in 2022. And it turns out that strict water conservation laws that were put into effect in 2003 had quite a positive impact on the valley, and we wish we could say the same thing about our neighboring states. We're looking directly at you, California. Number 2, proof Mafia members were here well into the year 2000s. Everybody knows the Mafia's connection to the old Vegas, and some say the Mafia never really left, and they might be right about that. Take Sam Mannerite, or Springfield Sam as his associates in the Genovese crime family called him. He was said to be a vicious debt collector, bashing people with golf clubs, and even threatening to douse their faces with acid if they didn't pay up. After doing time in 1993 for a last time for money laundering and being released, he decided to stay in Vegas, along with who knows how many other mobsters. In 2002, Springfield Sam ended up in jail again, but this time over a car deal which had gone bad. It was in September of that year the Mannerite showed up at a local car dealership, irate, claiming the dealership did his son wrong on a car deal. He opened fire with his gun, and the car lot owner returned fire. A shootout occurred, just like you'd see in the movies. The former mobster fled the scene in what else but a white Cadillac, and was later arrested, taken to hospital for gunshot wounds, and was later booked into jail. I guess some habits still die hard. Number 3, serial killers in our midst. Vegas is home to churches, not-for-profit groups, and all sorts of good things, but for a time, it was home to one of the most infamous and notorious serial killers of all time. This is going to get pretty adult, so pop on your headphones if you're at work or if the kids are around. It was in 1962 that John Wayne Gacy decided he had enough of his father. His dad bought him a car in 1960 and kept the title in his name so his son could make payments and learn to be responsible. Eventually, though, Gacy, known for his slaying of 33 young men and boys, while also being a offender and a had enough. He got in the car and drove to Las Vegas. He had a cousin who was, let's call her a working girl in Vegas, and after passing out from heat by sleeping in his car with the windows rolled up, he was rescued by an ambulance, which he couldn't pay for. He offered to work off the ambulance bill, and when the time came to getting a county work card to continue employment, he was out of luck being under 21 years of age. He eventually took a job at Palm Mortuary as the person who would go and pick up remains and deliver them to their final resting places. One day, after, for some reason, climbing in the casket that contained the deceased remains of an 11-year-old child, he had a panic attack, called his mother, and asked her if his father would allow him to come home. Oh, and if you're wondering, he also lost all of his cash gambling on Fremont Street on his very first day. Number 4, the Head in the Desert. When he renamed the club to Crazy Horse 2 in 1979, Tony Albanese had no idea that in less than 3 years, he would be just another Vegas mystery and would eventually end up in California, where it all started for him. Or at least his head without its body would end up there, that is. The bar started out as Billy Joe's The Power Company on Industrial Road. When Tony agreed to take a 50% interest in the bar, he changed the name to Billy Joe's Crazy Horse 2 and changed the go-go dancers to topless ones. Tony had problems, though. Las Vegas City Council was not happy with him changing the name. They made it hard for him to operate, and it was rumored that his past problems with organized crime syndicates in California caught up to him, and their connections in Sin City were the root of all of his government red tape issues. He never gave up, even when Las Vegas City Council banned him from entering his own establishments, and in 1981, he told his wife he was going out to meet a business associate. She was the last person to ever see Tony alive. He never returned. His car was found by what was then called McCarran International Airport, but there's no evidence of him ever taking a flight. The case got even stranger when a month later, a camper found his head outside Needles, California, 110 miles away from the Crazy Horse 2 club. There was no trauma, no gunshot wounds, no damage to the head whatsoever. It was in otherwise perfect shape, but police believe it was left somewhere where it would be easily found. When questioned about it being left as a message by someone, the Metro Police Department Homicide Lieutenant John Connor only answered, "Well, you can read it any way you want. It's definitely not normal." Before we get to our next 5 entries, I want to thank you for subscribing to this channel and remind you that subscribing to the channel would be a simple way to show your support. Oh, and don't forget to like the video as well. Tell us about what on this list has shocked you the most. Number 5, the Great One destroys MJ. Michael Jordan is, by some accounts, the greatest basketball player of all time. Wayne Gretzky is universally known as the best hockey player ever to live. Who's the real GOAT, or greatest of all time? It's hard to say, but you might have a different opinion when you hear this one. The story, according to former Hard Rock VP Rich Strafella, goes something like this. During a private card game where both Wayne Gretzky and Michael Jordan were sitting playing and seated next to one another, after being served a drink and paying the waitress a $5 chip as a tip, Wayne looked at the server and took the $5 chip off of the tray. He then brazenly took a $100 chip off Michael Jordan's stack and placed it on the server's tray. He then looked at Michael Jordan and calmly said, "No, Michael, this is how we tip in Las Vegas." Considering that the modern-day Michael Jordan is worth $1.6 billion and Wayne Gretzky has a worth of only $250 million these days, it seems bizarre that his royal airness was so cheap at the table, but I guess in the end, you can't take all your riches into heaven now, can ya? Number 6, the USS Fremont Street. In the early 1990s, one thing was certain. Vegas was morphing into a tourist hotspot filled with over-the-top themed attractions. Not wanting to play second fiddle to the Strip, which saw the Excalibur open in 1990 and properties like the Luxor and New York being developed and planned, the downtown Fremont Street casinos made a bold move to go big and redevelop Fremont Street itself. That's when downtown Las Vegas decided to build the Fremont Street experience, right? Well, no, not actually. Believe it or not, that's when the downtown hotels decided to say, "Make it so," turning downtown Las Vegas into a giant replica of the Starship Enterprise. Nope, I'm not kidding. A full-scale Enterprise from the Star Trek universe. So because so-called Star Trek nerds like me are rabid fans, we know exactly what this would mean. This would mean they would build a 940-foot, 7-foot long, 417-foot wide, and 230-foot tall spaceship downtown. Everything inside, it would be a perfect replica down to the last detail. And if for a brief second everything was in place, the city, the hotels, Paramount Studios who own Star Trek licenses, even the loans were in place for this thing. A week before the city and mayor were set to make the announcement, however, Paramount pulled the plug, citing a fear that if this failed, it would destroy and taint the Star Trek franchise forever. Quote, "Bad movies are forgotten," the Paramount executive said. But if something like this fails, it lasts forever. Right before they were to make it so, the Star Trek owners came in to pronounce, "It's dead, Jim." And yes, I'm a giant nerd. Thank you. Number 7, the first mass killing in Las Vegas you never heard of. It was 1967 when the explosion ripped through the motel in Las Vegas, ripping people apart and throwing their body parts absolutely everywhere. No, this isn't the plot of some Martin Scorsese film. This is an actual event that happened, and very little remains about this horrific event in the city's history. What we do know is that an AWOL officer, that's away without leave, a military term for someone that has deserted and ran away, happened on January 7th, 1967. The soldier, R.J. Paris of Hollywood, California, apparently made a out of 50 sticks of TNT and decided to trigger it by shooting it from outside the long-gone Orbit Inn motel on East Fremont Street. The blast was largely underreported, but it was so large that it damaged windows several blocks away and sent a human head into an alley behind the motel itself. The blast was so powerful, mattresses were blown into the air and found hanging on power lines behind the property. 6 lives were taken that day, and the incident is so hidden that barely anyone remembers, even people who lived and worked in the area and managed Fremont Street hotels at the time. Local levels of law enforcement fought after the DA's office called it a homicide after it turned out the DA made the statement to try to kill the story in the national media to protect the reputation of the city. All military records of the era were purged as being obsolete, and even though it made headlines across the United States, it had completely disappeared from all the news cycles within a week. To this date, no one really knows the motivation behind it, and the case has gone largely unsolved. Number 8, Mr. New Vegas. Wayne Newton is known as Mr. Vegas, a nickname given to him after a writer who watched his show in the early days declared, "Wayne Newton is truly Mr. Las Vegas." But Wayne Newton gets around like no other Vegas celebrity. I mean, the man has performed over 30,000 times in Las Vegas alone. And because of generational age differences, video game fans might not even know of his illustrious career that has spanned decades. But they do know him as Mr. New Vegas, the strange, ghostly voice-pulling DJ duty in the 2010 video game Fallout New Vegas.
Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mr. New Vegas. Thank you very, very much for listening. Whoops, better put on my newsman fedora here. There's word in from Camp McCarran that an attempt to bomb its monorail system was foiled by an alert civilian contractor. security is being tightened. In addition, Top's hotel owner Benny has been killed by an unidentified assailant.
Set in the year 2280 in a post-nuclear version of the city called New Vegas, frozen in time to an alternate universe where robots and mutants rule the wasteland, the game was incredibly true to its Southern Nevada backdrop, with developers Bethesda Softworks painstakingly recreating the likeness of the area and bringing in Newton as a wink to his ability to last through the ages. Whether or not we'll all be singing Dunkashane in 200 years from now in the future is debatable, but what is not up for debate is the amazing staying power and service that the real Mr. Las Vegas has done for the city. Number 9, no Soviets allowed. If you weren't paying attention in history class, you might have missed the extended period of time where the USA and the Soviet Union were locked and engaged in a Cold War. Nuclear weapons aimed at each other, one little mix-up ends the world type of Cold War. By the time 1952 rolled around, a US law barring all communists and therefore all Soviet citizens existed. But when Joseph Stalin died in 1953 and the Soviets decided to relax their restrictions, the finger was pointed directly at the USA as being the real oppressor, not allowing any Soviet citizens to enter into the country. Not wanting to look like the bad guy, the US government quickly drew up rules for where official diplomats or people with Soviet passports could travel when visiting each other's countries. And when in 1955 more travel was open to approved Soviet passport holders, specific places in America were very much off limits to those with Soviet visitation rights. There were no specific reasons given, but you might consider the close proximity to Hoover Dam and sensitive military installations in the area, as well as nuclear programs being developed, one of the primary reasons to keep Soviet citizens away from Las Vegas at the time. Eventually, though, in 1962, then U.S. President John F. Kennedy took away all restrictions in the U.S., and finally Las Vegas was able to welcome all people from the Soviet Union countries to freely gamble away all of their rubles in local casinos. Number 10, the Wynn family kidnapping. Now, when your father is one of the wealthiest people on the planet, you learn real fast that you're always going to be in danger and harm's way all the time. At least that's what the then 27-year-old Kevin Wynn learned when she was blindfolded and kidnapped out of her own kitchen in 1993. It was only when Wynn received photos of his daughter in her underwear wearing dark sunglasses, being staged to look like she was a willing participant in some kind of horrible that he took action. You see, the kidnappers, they said that this was their insurance policy. If Wynn were to go to the police or the FBI, they would risk having the photos released to major news agencies, which would cause a huge scandal and damage to the Wynn name. You might think that one of the world's wealthiest people would call in some kind of special recovery team with former Navy SEALs like in a movie, but instead, Steve Wynn simply did what a dealmaker like him does. He negotiated with them for the ransom. The kidnappers wanted $2.5 million, and Wynn explained that casino vaults would only keep $1.45 million on hand. The kidnappers then believed him and agreed to that sum. The Wynn walked into the vault at the Mirage Hotel and Casino, took out $1.45 million and neatly stacked $100 bills, and then delivered them directly to the kidnappers. His daughter was found where the kidnappers said she would be, in the parking lot at McCarran International Airport on the south end of the Las Vegas Strip. The kidnappers were finally caught after one of them was found making the final payment on his brand new Ferrari Testarossa in Newport Beach, California. I guess as clever as they thought that they were, they forgot that perfectly stacked and wrapped bricks of $100 bills have serial numbers which are easily tracked from the treasury where they originate to the bank, to the casino vault, and then eventually to car dealerships in Newport Beach. So that rounds out our 10 list of crazy things that you didn't know about Vegas. What's the story that surprised you most of all? While you're here, go ahead and check out one of the other videos on the screen right here, and be sure to subscribe for future content and lists just like this. My name is Steven. I'm not leaving Las Vegas. I love you and miss you, Caroline. And as we always say, 3, 2, 1, and click!